Hey friends, welcome back to another episode of Going Nuclear. I'm here with a very special guest, Jeremy Whitlock. He is an educator, he is a safeguard specialist, and much, much more. So, Dr. Whitlock, welcome.
Thanks, Osama. It's a pleasure to see you in the flesh after such a while discussing with you different things over the internet. It's a pleasure to be here at the CNA. One thing that I was trained to do was a reactor physicist. So the thing that I went to school for was reactor physics, and I did that for a number of years in the industry before getting into safeguards and non-proliferation.
Sweet. So, let's jump right into it. Safeguards. When people hear safeguards, they're confused. They're like, what is safeguards? But it's one of the most important aspects of the nuclear industry.
Right.
Uh, Tell us, what is safeguards?
Well, safeguards, first of all, is not safety and it's not security. It's the third S. It's the Non-Proliferation Treaty. And so Canada in the early 70s signed the Non-Proliferation Treaty along with hundreds of other countries. And essentially, this is the declaration that it is not going to pursue a nuclear weapon and is not going to receive the knowledge to make a nuclear weapon, and it's not going to try and make a nuclear weapon, and it's only going to deal with countries that have also signed the NPT, with its bilateral follow-up to that. And so if you're going to enter into that kind of an obligation, you need a third party to vet that and to verify it. And so that third party is the International Atomic Energy Agency, located in beautiful Vienna, Austria, where I spent the last 8 years. And they send inspectors, and that's the third party verification agency. What they're doing is they're checking the safeguards, and the safeguards are cameras, seals that belong to the International Atomic Energy Agency, or the IAEA. The cameras, seals, laser scanning devices, just walking through a plant, just sending an inspector with good old fashioned walking through a plant on the way to check seals. They're looking for other signs of diversion of nuclear material. Even Canada, the Boy Scout of Earth. Nobody's exempt that has signed the NPT. The closest you get to exemption is if you already have nuclear weapons. If you're a nuclear weapons country like the U.S., like Russia, like France, like China, and England is the fifth one. If you are one of the 5 nuclear weapons countries, you are not under comprehensive safeguards. You've already got nuclear weapons, and this is part of the deal of the Non-Proliferation Treaty. But every other country, and so there's 180 plus countries that have signed the Non-Proliferation Treaty, submits all of its nuclear material and facilities in its nuclear program in its peaceful civilian nuclear program to safeguard. So where I worked at the IAEA in Vienna, I was part of the team that we didn't go to the different countries. So as exotic as that sounds and nice, and some people like doing it, it's a lot of traveling. So there's a couple of hundred inspectors, and they are on the road for a big fraction of the year. And so yes, you go to these nice countries, but you are in the nuclear facilities. And so you're on the concrete floors, and you're in the low humidity and the heat sometimes, and you're spending afternoons, and you're looking for the nuclear fuel. You're looking for the spent fuel in the storage pools. You're going to the dry storage containers, and you're making sure that the seals are on the dry storage containers. We don't open up the dry storage containers. You check the seals, which is the beauty of the safeguards. So the inspector comes, and is the IAEA seal, so it's not the operator seal, but is the IAEA seal still intact? And if it is, they haven't been into that container. I was part of the group that was behind the scenes, making sure that the right protocols were followed. For example, in that particular scenario, the inspector comes and looks at the dry storage container, looks at the seal. How they check the underside of the container. It's a big concrete thing. It's heavy. You can't easily lift it, but it is liftable. It was put there on the pad by the owner. The owner belongs to the country. The country is what has signed the NPT. So what makes safeguards different from both security and safety, because safety, the antagonist is physics and chemistry and nature and the weather, compromising your facility, making it more dangerous to other people. Security is bad people coming over the fence or an internal threat, but it's not the owner of the facility itself. And safeguards, the design basis threat in safeguards is the operator of the facility, is the country, is the government, the army, the police, the intelligence community. everybody, the person sweeping the floor, are in on this hypothetical covert conspiracy to divert plutonium or uranium from the spent fuel or from the fresh fuel to a covert nuclear weapons program. And so does the IAEA in Vienna think that Canada is doing this? No, of course not. But Canada has signed the NPT, which means that Canada must be proving to the world that it isn't doing this. So it's Canada that is initiating this need, and it's Canada that needs the third party inspectors to come in. So for the last 8 years, I've been working behind the scenes on not just conventional systems, LWRs and CANDU, but on small modular reactors. On a lot of it was waste management, so the dry storage containers I was talking about, even decontaminated waste, where you might, because believe it or not, you've got small level, low concentration sometimes of uranium, plutonium even, in facilities that were used to say their legacy facilities at Chalk River or legacy facilities at Port Hope. You take apart an old concrete building, it might have uranium dust embedded in the concrete. If it's uranium and plutonium, even in low concentration, it's subject to safeguards. Now, if it's low enough concentration, the IAEA can terminate safeguards. The state can request that the safeguard be terminated. And of course, that's what the IAEA wants as well, because who wants to be applying safeguards to contamination level quantities, concentrations of nuclear material? But that even though that's low sensitive material, that's the largest volume that we deal with, and the most, I would say, the most difficult currently that I saw in my time over there, because you have it's not just embedded in concrete and sometimes large volumes of it, but the understanding that it's subject to safeguards, it's has a lot to be there's a lot to be done in getting that message out there. So we would find when I was at the IAEA that often you have a waste campaign, a waste management campaign. So it's red waste, it's not spent fuel waste, but just radioactive waste from decontamination or any normal operation at facility. Sometimes you have encapsulation of that waste into barrels. Sometimes there's super compaction taking place. Sometimes the barrels are filled, sealed, and placed into a concrete caisson, and sometimes that's filled over with earth. So sometimes the thing is not even visible anymore, and then somebody realizes that international safeguards should have been taken into account if it's a country that's not a nuclear weapons country again. And so then a lot of what I was dealing with was this retrospective and retroactive assessment of what do we do now. First of all, there's the raising of awareness. Now we all know that it's under safeguards. What are we going to do about it? No, we're not going to make you dig up those X number of barrels, but we need to have some level of assurance of what went into those barrels. What did you measure? And typically for waste, it's, well, there's so many becquerels coming off each barrel. How much uranium and plutonium? Well, we didn't measure that because it's waste. So to make it uh, legal to put it where it is, we only had to measure the becquerels. The IAEA needs to know more than that. They need a level of characterization that you wouldn't normally do for that level of waste. And so that's an issue, because doing that retroactively is difficult. Um, Doing it ahead of time, raising the awareness ahead of time, then becomes the priority. Because if everybody understands that this is the obligation of the country, it's not the IAEA requiring this, it's not the operator's company, it's not the utility, it's the government, it's the country. The country has signed the NPT, the Non-Proliferation Treaty. So if that awareness is there ahead of time, then you can work with the regulator, the CNSC, and you can work with the International Atomic Energy Agency, and you can sit in the room long before the facility is even designed or the campaign, the waste management campaign's even begun. And you can say, hey, look, what do you guys need to know? You need to know how much uranium and plutonium? We can give you that. Before it goes in the barrel, before it's cemented, before we compact it, before we put it in underground, there's a time when, yes, it's a little bit extra characterization we wouldn't normally have done for our safety regs, but we realize this is an equally important compliance that's needed. We can also do that, and we can have you come randomly perhaps and check our processes. Otherwise, we will do these measurements and send the reports through the CNSC to the IAEA. And then and maybe there's even an extra detector that's needed, but acquiring this ahead of time and incorporating this in the process is not a big deal. And that is called safeguards by design, because instead of coming after the fact, after the thing is designed and in operating, You're talking to the designer of the process or of the facility. If it's an SMR, it's a vendor of a new reactor, like a molten salt reactor or a pebble bed reactor, a reactor that the IAEA does not have a safeguards approach for currently, but will need to have it as soon as the reactor there's a construction process underway for one. They will need to have a safeguards approach soon after that. For conventional looking SMRs that use light water fuel, not a big deal, but for molten salt reactors, for pebble bed reactors, even graphite prismatic reactors, there will be some advanced work needed. So safeguards by design became a very important buzzword in the 8 years that I was working at the IAEA. I was working on the concept when I was at Chalk River as well. I went from reactor physics into non-proliferation. We didn't necessarily call it safeguards by design then. It was more, let's just talk about safeguards ahead of time. But now it's safeguards by design, which really encapsulates the idea that you're talking to the designer. It's not an inspector showing up on a plane with a Pelican case with a blue camera in it after the reactor has been built. It's the design is on it's a blueprint. Perhaps there's a new detector needed. Perhaps there's some integrated process to incorporate the safeguards into the process itself. So, for example, if it's a waste management process, um, having something that's part of the characterization of the fuel, when it's going to have the least burden on the operator to do that kind of thing. The IAEA also wants the least burden. Everybody wants the least burden. Nobody wants to do more work than they have to, spend more money than they have to, send inspectors on planes more than they have to. Which, by the way, is what you do if you don't have efficient safeguards. You send more inspectors on more planes that fly around the world and do things the old-fashioned way because there's no detector in place, and try and figure things out, sometimes retrospectively and retroactively. And by the way, inspectors flying on planes is something that does not work very well when there's a global pandemic. So during COVID, especially for the first 3 months or so, there was very little verification going on or no verification going on, which all had to be regained. The knowledge had to be regained afterwards. Wherever you had a facility that had remote data transmission, that had a resident camera or that was transmitting information to Vienna, or a seal that was transmitting like fiber optic seal and it's or electronic seal that's transmitting information to Vienna to say I'm still sealed, I'm still connected, or any kind of a device, radiation detection device. If you can sit in Vienna and look at these devices, look at these cameras signals, and basically get the lion's share of the inspection done, you can still have continuity of knowledge even during a global pandemic. And any facility that had that in place retained its continuity of knowledge. And that's a very small percentage of the facilities out there. Several in Canada, by the way, have that installed. CANDU reactors have that installed. Wherever you didn't have that, then there was loss of continuity of knowledge, and you had to regain that often as soon as you could, as soon as flights were possible.
Hmm.
Once you got into sort of month 6, month 7 of the COVID pandemic, it was possible to go to some countries. Of course, then you had these large quarantine periods. You had sometimes when inspectors were going to a country and they were spending 3 weeks in quarantine, then doing a couple of days of inspection, and then coming back to Austria and spending a week in quarantine. Extremely inefficient way to do safeguards, and all of that can be avoided with remote data transmission and equipment that's resident at the facility. And you get that through safeguards by design, because all of that can be, or you're taking data from the operator's instruments. That's possible as well. It's not as nice because remember the design basis threat is the operator. So taking the data from the operator and his or her equipment, it's kind of a flaw that you can see. So when the IAEA does that, it needs to ensure that the data is actually the data. So it needs to have it authenticated from as close to the source of the data as possible. So which often means 2 data lines coming from the tip of the probe, for example, if it's a radiation detector. Again, that's a design change. Better still to have your own IAEA detector next to the operator's detector. But now you've got 2 detectors in the facility, twice as many detectors. So all of this is what I was doing. It's extremely important. It's not safety. It's not it's not security, but it's as important. And better still, let's talk about these 3 S's together with the designers when the designs are on paper.
This episode is being recorded live at the annual CNA conference, Canada's largest gathering of professionals from across the nuclear industry. If you want to know more about the association's work, please click on the link in the description below. Thank you for that overview. That was a really great overview of what the IAEA does. You went through some really important topics there. So Jeremy, tell me about the uh, the founding of the International Atomic Energy Agency. How was this organization founded? Why was it founded? And yeah, tell us the origins.
Yeah, so after World War II is what we're talking about. There was a huge upheaval in the world caused by World War II, and desire around the planet that we cannot have this happen again. Conventional warfare, but at the end of World War II, you had the introduction of nuclear warfare. So everything that happened in that period of time cannot happen again, including we don't want more countries to have these nuclear weapons, which at that time, right after World War II, was just the United States. Um, so there was a desire to keep the information just within the United States, and sort of denial of access to that level of information. But eventually, other countries were developing the bomb, and so there was a recognition that, as well, at the same time, there was a recognition that there are an immense amount of benefits from nuclear energy, not just electricity production, but nuclear medicine, isotopes, clean water, enormous potential, and it was just being realized at that time. And so there was this simultaneous desire to spread the good news of nuclear throughout the world, the benefits, but you need to, how do you control the ability, retain the ability to make nuclear weapons only in the countries, the one or the two, it soon became five, that had that ability. And so there was a famous speech made by President Eisenhower of the U.S. in 1953 to the United Nations, and he proposed this atoms for peace proposal. So atoms, nuclear for peace instead of war, help us bring sustainable agriculture to the world. Third world countries can have food that lasts longer on the shelf, or have um, crops that are more resistant to disease and weather. And this can all be done with nuclear technology. How can we spread that goodness of nuclear, but prevent them from making nuclear weapons? Because there will always be this yin and yang of nuclear. There will always be, you cannot separate them. The technology to make a nuclear reactor, the reactor physics, to do that, those folks can turn their thoughts to making a nuclear weapon. And you can make the material for a bomb in a nuclear reactor, in any kind of nuclear reactor as well. So there needs to be a way to let countries have nuclear reactors, for example, and ensure that they're not using the nuclear reactor to make plutonium. Well, all reactors make plutonium anyway, and it's in the fuel. So about half the energy from a CANDU reactor comes from plutonium. But we want to make sure it stays in the fuel. So how do you do that? Right after this Atoms for Peace speech, which included the proposition that there be a international agency that look after this, there was work put underway to create what became the IAEA. And in 1957, the IAEA started up. And so its job then was to allow countries to engage in the commerce of nuclear by providing the verification component. The IA also provided the assistance for the peaceful side as well. So it would provide education, resources, um, expertise, and it would connect countries together. So it would connect, for example, Canada to customer countries, so that they could have cancer therapy machines using cobalt-60 made in these research reactors at Chalk River. But in order for those countries to purchase those cobalt-60 cancer therapy machines from Canada, they would need to sign this thing called the Non-Proliferation Treaty, which eventually came around in 1970. So the IAEA started in 1957. There were rudimentary safeguards, as we've been discussing, put in place shortly after that. And it wasn't until late 1960s, 1970, that the Non-Proliferation Treaty came in place, which was the basis for comprehensive safeguards. So not just a facility or some barrels of heavy water used for research purposes or for reactor design, but the entire country and all of its nuclear material, uranium, and then plutonium that's created in nuclear reactors, subject to safeguards.
Is that a lot of people they ask they have an assumption that nuclear power reactors are being used to make nuclear weapons. Okay. If someone were to ask you that, what would be a simple response you would give them to let them know that this isn't the case?
Very simply, we have all the reactors that are in countries that don't already have nuclear weapons. We have those reactors under safeguards. And that means that we are checking, we have boots on the ground that are going to those facilities that are putting cameras in place. They're checking the cameras. The cameras are often being looked at from Vienna remotely anyway. There's seals on containers that have the fuel. So there is this deterrence that at any moment an inspector from Vienna can show up in theory and ask to see the uranium atoms, and they better be able to count all the uranium atoms that they want to count. That's one part of it. The other part of it is that even if you did want to use a nuclear reactor to make plutonium, say for a nuclear weapon, you probably wouldn't do it with a power reactor because for various reasons. The first of one being that the power reactor is a multi-billion-dollar asset that you purchased with great pain to acquire, and it's there to make electricity. So it's serving a role, and you do not want to jeopardize that. Secondly, you know the eyes of the world are on you because you have a power reactor and you've signed the NPT. And by signing the NPT, this enabled you to get that power reactor in the first place. So it's all connected. Um, Thirdly, even if you were interested in the plutonium that is being made, I mentioned earlier that in a CANDU reactor, half the energy, roughly speaking, comes from the plutonium, which has been created in the fuel. Well, that's what we call reactor grade plutonium. It's not as pure plutonium. It's not weapons grade plutonium that you would use in a nuclear weapon. So you wouldn't even be interested in that plutonium. You could do things with that plutonium. It can be used in low level explosives. And so this is why we come and check the spent fuel. This is why the IAEA verifies spent fuel that's in dry storage or in the storage pools. Because plutonium is plutonium and can be used, but it's not the kind of plutonium used in Hiroshima style, military nuclear weapons. So more likely, in history bears this out, you would, if you were really interested in a covert nuclear weapons um, program, you would develop some covert way of making the plutonium, and that would enable you to make the really good plutonium, which is militarily useful. So that's another area of international security, um, which the world worries about, but that's not what's going on at the nuclear reactors. The nuclear reactor is making electricity, or it's making radioisotopes for medicine. And how do we know? Because there's an agency in Vienna that is keeping an eye, a very close eye, with some very detailed information flowing to Vienna, either in the briefcase of the inspectors who visited, or actually literally flowing to Vienna through secure internet connections. And it's being monitored all the time.
Interesting. Yeah. No, it's really good to know. And it's, I'm glad you shed the light on like reactor grade plutonium versus weapons grade plutonium. Such a huge difference there between them.
Yeah.
What are some things that you tell people about safeguards and that just blows their mind?
I think people are surprised to learn that in how many countries safeguards are being applied. Um, I find, well, one thing that surprises people is when you tell them that in the United States, a lot of the nuclear engineering community there does not understand about IAEA international safeguards. And I think, well, this is crazy. Didn't our president make a speech in 1953, Atoms for Peace, which kind of started that whole thing? And this is true, but because and so the United States is a leader in nuclear development. It's a leader in non-proliferation, but at the operational level, in the reactors, there are no safeguards. There are no comprehensive safeguards. So the spent fuel in the pools in the U.S. Not under safeguards because it's a wet nuclear weapons country. They're under an agreement called a voluntary offer agreement. So they can put their facilities up for that can be optionally chosen voluntarily, voluntarily offered by the state and then optionally taken by the IAEA, but not for the application of full safeguards. In that case, it's for maybe learning if the agency wants to learn something about any type of facility, but none of the operating reactors in the U.S. are under safeguards, and this is a surprise to a lot of people because they think surely the U.S. is got safeguards up to the hilt. Well, no, because they're in this category of being a nuclear weapon state. So just like Russia and France and China and the UK, um, th- they're they're not under safeguards. So that's a surprise. Um, I guess they might be surprised at how beautiful the city Vienna is. Some of them, some people that come to visit the IAEA, or now I understand why you moved here from Chalk River and you spent eight years here. It is one of the consistently um, it's consistently winning this title as one of the most livable cities on the planet, sort of thing. So that's a surprise as well. Perhaps related to that, it would be surprising to learn that Austria is a very anti-nuclear country. So the IAEA is located in a country which is extremely anti-nuclear, um, and actually built a light water reactor some years ago, completed it, and then had a referendum about whether it should operate it or not. And the referendum came down to 50-50, but slightly less than 1% negative. Um, Personally, I think if you're going to have a multi-billion-dollar asset on the line, you should have something a little stronger than just a 50% demonstration. However, the government of the day agreed that if it was 50.1% negative, they would shut the reactor down or never start it up in the first place, and they did that, and that's surprising. So this facility is still there. It makes it a really good training facility because it's a nuclear reactor that is everything is there, but it is never operated, so it's not radioactive, and you can go into all the innards and you can train IAEA inspectors because it's only about an hour from the IAEA. So it's this inadvertent training facility, so to speak. Um, it's also used by. There's been some movies that have been filmed there as well.
That's so cool. I think it's a really cool YouTube video where they go inside that reactor,
Mhm.
and you see the pressure vessel
Oh
and
yeah, yeah,
all
yeah.
these kind of really cool areas. And I believe they've had some events in that concert. Sorry, like
Yeah, yeah.
concerts or whatnot.
It's quite a cool place. Yeah.
That area, that's pretty awesome. Okay, so how was it like living in Vienna? Like, I know you lived there for several
Yeah.
years. How was the city like? Tell us a little bit about that.
Vienna is an easy city to live in. It's safe and clean. The people are nice. It's a German-speaking city, so there's an opportunity to learn German. I didn't learn it fluently because I first of all, you're working in English at the IAEA. It's an English-speaking environment. I was surrounded by my posse of Canadian friends. Um, could have reached out a little more. We had some local friends as well, but a lot of you people that you would go and have birthday parties with and other events are English speaking. And the city itself, English is a second language there, and they're very proud of their English. And so you walk into a restaurant, and as soon as they know that you're English speaking, out comes the English menu. It's driven by tourism as well. I think tourism is the number one industry in Vienna. Would be my guess. So it's a beautiful city. It's got a freakishly efficient public transit system. Canada could learn a lot. I was almost embarrassed to be from Canada, where a country that should have a lot more trains going east-west. But no, we hop in our SUVs and we drive. Where in Vienna, yes, in Austria, which is much like the rest of Europe, you can just go anywhere you want. If you pick where you want to go, there's going to be a train leaving within 40 minutes going to that place. And if you miss that train, there's going to be one 20 minutes later, and so on throughout the day at a very low price. So that was very nice. This really surprises folks from Toronto, say, when I tell them how much it costs to ride the subway in Vienna, €1 a day.
Wow.
So you pay 300, you literally 365 euros a year gives you free pass to all the subways, streetcars, buses, and a lot of the regional trains without going through a turnstile, just the honor system walking. And so as a pedestrian there, we didn't own a car for 8 years. We got rid of a minivan and a car when we went to Vienna. You get quite used to just wandering from bus underground to a subway and then up, and then you go to an event, and then you come up and then you just find the nearest thing on wheels and you hop into it, and it's all covered by this pass that you've got somewhere in your wallet that you haven't seen for months, and now it's on your phone anyway. So yeah, it's a nice place to live, and I encourage it I often, I mean, the IAEA looks for expertise in the industry. So they're not going to take a lot of, they have an internship program. They have the Lees Meitner program where they have young women that are they're already going through grad studies can spend a year as part of, it's kind of like a intern program plus. Um, you don't make a lot of money, but you're living in Vienna. And you get to work at the IAEA. So, but other than that, generally the professional ranks of the IAEA, they're looking for at least 5 or 7 years of professional experience, because the whole point is that you have expertise. It's not a training facility; it's a user facility of member state expertise. Um, but but notwithstanding that, I tell people, think about, if you like multicultural environments to work, if you like the idea of living in Central Europe and having 12 countries on your border within a 3 or 4 hour radius, um, and it's the EU, so that those 12 countries don't need passports to get into. Um, then think about the IAEA, and it can be anything. You can be in any profession in the nuclear world, or even not, but it can be applied. Think about working at the IAEA, because they could use the expertise, they can use the enthusiasm and energy of young folks. Lord knows they can use the energy of young folks. And once you've got the 5 or 7 years, and you get in the itch, look to the IAEA. Yeah, is in Vienna.
Nice. That's honestly like I love this detailed explanation. I'd love to visit Vienna. I actually haven't been to Vienna yet, so
Well,
one day that's definitely on my list to go to the headquarters and
yep, I would have loved to show you around
for sure, for sure.
if I was still there.
And I think one really cool aspect that I think a lot of people romanticize is maybe inspectors kind of traveling across the world, which for young people I think
Yeah,
is really fun with a lot of energy.
it's a young person's gig.
Yeah. So, how's that like traveling across the world? Like, I'm sure you've talked to a lot of
Yeah, yeah.
inspectors. Yeah. What's that job like?
So again, that's not what I did, but I knew a lot of inspectors, and it's trying. It's not as exotic as it sounds. You do go to some really nice places. So if you just look at the names of the countries that go, it's every country on the planet. So you name it. Some countries are nicer than others, but they will go less to the countries that don't have a nuclear program, and most countries don't have a nuclear program actually. Um, and they'll go more to countries like Germany and in the EU. They'll come to Canada a lot, but in Japan. But they're on the road a lot where they're flying. They're doing a lot of flying. So I'm talking like 100 to 200 days of the year. Whoa, yeah, yeah, closer to 100. But it's very trying. You have to have an aptitude for observational skills. You have to like spending hours in nuclear facilities, which, as I mentioned earlier, are usually, dry, hot, concrete floor facilities. You're bringing your own instruments with you a lot of the time. So you're traveling with pelican cases of instruments. What you're doing when you get there is you're cutting seals, you're inspecting seals, cutting them, replacing them with new seals. Or you're taking SD cards out of cameras sometimes. You're using your observational skills. So you're looking, it's not just are you trying to verify that nuclear material has not been diverted, but you're also verifying that there's not some covert operation. So there's not some hot cells in a room off to the side where they are, say, reprocessing the material which they would divert. So you're looking for signs of construction, is not there on the blueprints. And design verification is a big part of safeguards. It's not just that you're verifying the ongoing operations, but it's 'cause that really wouldn't matter if the place wasn't built the way it was supposed to. If there was a secret room, the underground layer where they're doing the separation. So you need to know the underground layer is not there. So inspection starts before, when it's a hole in the ground,
Mhm.
and they will show up during construction. But the life of inspector it's not for everybody. You do get to go to a lot of countries. So if traveling is something you like, especially if you're young and you want to tick off a lot of countries, I don't mean tick off in in an angry way, but tick them off on your bucket list. Um, then yes, you will see a lot of countries as an inspector.
So the big question is, are
Or
first class flights being covered? Like, can you sleep on the plane?
it's depends on the number of hours. Like a lot of
Okay.
organizations have a threshold for the number of hours. So there will be, I forget what it is for the IAEA. and it changes anyway. But for some of the longer haul flights, yes, you fly in comfort.
Not bad.
Yeah,
Doesn't sound like a bad deal.
yeah. And you get a rest day when you get there, and yeah. So it's not that you're out of pocket. It's not that you're being rushed to get there necessarily. It's just that you are on the road a lot.
Mhm.
So if you've got a family back home, they're not going to see you. If you're taking your friend with you to your family with you to Vienna, to live in Vienna together, and you're an inspector, well, you will be on the road and leaving your family there, and that's just part of the lake. You know that going in. It's it's typically not a long time career organization. The contracts will typically be 7 years in length anyway. So when I'm encouraging people to think about the IAA, I often say, well, think about when you want to retire, and then that year minus 7, and maybe around that time think about applying, because it's a nice way to end your career. Which at that point in your career, you're also an expert in whatever field you've been working in too. So these two things go together. And maybe not an inspector, but you can work as I did behind the scenes on more or less like the R&D side of it, because every one of those inspection visits has to have technical support um, back at headquarters, and you have people that are working on people like myself working on the processes, making sure that the right procedures are in place and they are achieving what they're supposed to achieve. Then you have a whole group that works on the manipulation of the data that comes back from the inspectors, from the inspections, from the inspectors, from the equipment, and comparing it to what we know about the country and seeing if there are discrepancies. So there's a whole group of statisticians, information management people, and then there's a whole group of technical folks that maintain the cameras and the seals. Sometimes work on design of new equipment. Not a lot of heavy R&D going on in new equipment, say like new detectors. That is done by the member states. For example, Canada, this is surprising, I guess. Canada developed what I would say is the workhorse instrument of the IAEA inspection regime, which is these Cherenkov viewing devices. So they look like cameras, but they have ultraviolet filters on them. Why ultraviolet? Because the light, the blue glow coming from the spent fuel that's in the water-filled bay is Cherenkov radiation, and it's blue, but it's also mostly ultraviolet light. And so these cameras can see right away if it's spent fuel or has the operator, which the operator is the design basis threat in the whole scenario, has the operator taken some spent fuel, put it in the underground layer, and swapped in some fresh fuel, because they look exactly the same in the visible spectrum. But in the ultraviolet spectrum, you'll see just a bunch of glowing fuel, which is radioactive, and then this conspicuous non-glowing fuel. So there's this Cherenkov viewing device, or CVD, which is against the workhorse tool. When I say inspectors travel with a Pelican case with things in it, that's what's in it. Is for sure is one of these things. Um, and they will go and spend an afternoon over a spent fuel bay, and they will look at a select number, a randomly selected number of these spent fuel elements, looking for verifying the blue glow, purple glow. Um, and that was invented and designed and sold to the IAEA by Canada. So we played a big role in not only initiating the IAEA and being a member of the Board of Governors since 1957 when it started, and developing a lot of what we know today about the non-proliferation regime, but also developing some of the equipment for it.
I did not know that. That's really, really interesting
Yeah.
fact. Yeah, that's phenomenal. So like we're at the CNA conference, Canadian Nuclear Association conference, and it's one of my favorite events of the year. Reconnecting with colleagues, meeting new ones, and just sharing information and um getting a good understanding of where the industry's at. How's your experience so far at the CNA conference?
Oh, this has been a fantastic conference. So I have been away for 8 years. That means being 8 years away from conferences like this in Canada. It's amazing to see not only the vibrancy of the industry now, but the youth of the industry. I don't remember seeing as many young people walking around these conferences. The palpable excitement, and I know there's talk of renaissance now and then, but it really feels like something is taking root now. The signs are there, the vibes are there. that enough sectors of society are buying into this idea that nuclear is actually an available solution for sustainable development. And it's not the only solution, and it's not better than this one or worse than that one. It's part of the toolkit. So that idea that it's part of the toolkit, let's give it a fair shake. Let's see how it compares. Let's see what it costs. Let's just not throw it out because it's got the word nuclear in the title. So there's that sense in society now, and you see it reflected in the number of people attending a conference like this in the beautiful conference center in downtown Ottawa, looking out on Parliament Hill. It's great to be here. It's great to be back.
100%. What's your favorite memories from your CNA?
The CNA conference, being in Ottawa and seeing folks that, as I mentioned, it was a smaller conference. Some of those folks are still walking around here today. We a little bit less hair, or uh, in my case, or gray hair, but they're still around. But sharing that excitement has always been there. Now it's permeated throughout society more and into the schools more. But um, when you work in nuclear, you're used to a certain attitude from the public. Let's say, or you're at a party even, and someone asks you what you do, and you say, I work in nuclear. Oh, have you blown somebody up today, or do you glow green? And haha, haven't heard that one before. So the conferences like this, the CNA conference or the CNS conference, the Canadian Nuclear Society, um, were always venues where you had like-minded people who get it, who have dedicated their lives to making nuclear energy safer and more affordable, and in some cases trying to explain it better to the public, because being safe and affordable doesn't matter if the public doesn't understand it, because then politicians won't back it, and you need lots of money to build nuclear reactors. So it all comes down to the social license is extremely important, and I think that's what you see change now. Is this the social license is there? We can see it. It was not something we're talking about, something that we want to achieve. We're seeing it in the process of being granted.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's definitely an exciting time in the industry. I really enjoyed this discussion. Jeremy,
Likewise.
I'm so happy to meet you. I love all the work that you've done with nuclear FAQ and your leadership in the industry. So I'm really, really, really happy and excited to meet you in person. So thank you so much for the discussion.
Well, thank you. It's very nice of you to say, and I must say it's a pleasure to meet you as well. And congratulations, you are an example of that youthful energy I was talking about, and communicating better to the public.
Thank you so much. So if you want to connect with Jeremy, you can do that in the link below. I'll have some his contact information, and also maybe some links about safeguards, so you can do your own research on the IAEA website. But thank you so much for tuning in. Till next time, take care. Bye.